Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Peppis, Interim Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guests today are Gabriela Martinez and Sonia de la Cruz. Gabriella Martinez is an associate professor in the School of Journalism and Communication, as well as an international award-winning documentary filmmaker. She has produced, directed, or edited more than 12 ethnographic and socio-political documentaries, including Women, Media, and Rebellion in Oaxaca, Latino Roots in Lane County, and Keep Your Eyes on Guatemala. In addition to her career as a documentary producer, Martinez is engaged in research focusing on international and global communication, media ownership, and media culture. Sonia de la Cruz is a doctoral candidate in the School of Journalism and Communication. Her research broadly analyzes the relationship between globalization and cultural identity through trans-border media. Her academic interests include international communication, third world development, communication, globalization, identity, and social change. Martinez and de la Cruz recently completed a documentary film titled Agents of Change, A Legacy of Feminist Research, Teaching, and Activism at the University of Oregon. The film was produced to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Center for the Study of Women in Society, CSWS. The film will be screened during the 40th anniversary celebration on November 7th, 2013. Gabriela and Sonia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
CSWS is one of the oldest women's research centers in the U.S. What led to its establishment at the U of O?
Well, actually, the history of CSWS is very interesting, and it began as a center for the sociological study of women. So it began as a small research center in the sociology department, and it is later on when they got an endowment that they became what is now known as the Center for the Study of Women in Society. So I think that what it led to this research center was different things, what was going on in the country at that particular time in terms of feminism, the women's movement, all of that, and how that got into academia. It's very interesting. It was through different professors here on campus, being one of them, I guess the first professor that taught a feminist course on campus was John Acker in the sociology department.
So she was really the one who began the process of establishing the Center for the Sociological Study of Women, right? That's what it was first called?
Yes, yes. She, along with other of her colleagues, I think the most instrumental faculty members at that time in the 1970s were John Acker, Barbara Pope, and
Farwell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As well.
I would say the three of them probably were kind of the force or the core people at that particular moment, and then other folks, I started working with them.
So what were some of the challenges that faced them when they started to go about trying to create this program for the study of women?
Well, it's really interesting because through some of the interviews that we've had, we really discovered that there was in general this sort of tension, resistance to the idea of advancement of women within academia. At the time Joan Acker began her career here at the University of Oregon, she came to the UO as a graduate student. She was the second woman to receive a PhD from the sociology department at that time. So she was breaking ground in that way.
So this is the early 1970s?
This is, yes. So I lost my train of thought.
She was the breaking ground as the first woman, the second woman to get a PhD.
Right, and so it's been really interesting to see how she really, along with other colleagues, and actually wanted to mention also Dick Hale from the sociology department, who was the only man who supported the Center for the Sociological Study of Women at that time, to really sort of break ground and push studies that had to do with women before a time where even the idea or the notion of gender existed. So
you mentioned resistance. This resistance was coming from other faculty?
Yes.
From administrators?
Well, apparently it was from both. Some faculty, there is, in the documentary, people will be able to see this. I mean, there is this anecdotal story that Miriam Farwell, I think, is telling us, where one of her colleagues told her, wow, are you going to be teaching this class about women? Well, I would like to teach a class on fishing. You know, so that was kind of the environment that they have to confront. Then Joan Acker also has this wonderful story that one day she was at the Saturday market and one of her male colleagues kind of yelled at her across the street, you damn feminist. So I mean, these are sort of anecdotes that now we can laugh about that maybe, but that was the type of resistance that was, in terms of curricula, what can be teach in the classroom and how some people felt about that. But on the other hand, there were also some people who were supportive of this, like Did Hill in the sociology department, and later on President Robert Clark in the 1980s when he was instrumental to make that, make CSWS happen along with the core faculty that was involved in this.
So tell us about the transition from the Center for the Sociological Study of Women and what happens at that time that Clark is involved with that leads to the founding of CSWS. How in the materials that come to support or to promote the 40th celebration, they talk there about an extraordinary act of generosity and philanthropy. Tell us about that.
Well, that came about in 1983. Probably it began in 1980-81 when the process of this fabulous gift was given to the University of Oregon for the purpose of establishing the center. What happened is that Ed Camp in the library, he was a librarian, he was looking for papers of different people across the country.
And he had heard about the death of a woman called Jane Grant, so he had investigated whether he could get some of her papers, and he took a trip to New York and then found Jane Grant's husband.
Can I stop you and just,
Yeah.
Who was Jane Grant? Tell us who she was.
Okay.
Why don't you start off?
Well, Jane Grant was this incredible woman who was born at the end of the 19th century. And as a young person, I believe she was born, if I recall well, in Kansas. But then she moved to New York when she was really young. And she wanted to be an artist, and she was really outgoing. And she managed actually to become very familiar with all the elite of New York. And she became a journalist. She loved writing, and she basically pushed herself as a writer for the Times. And later on, she founded the New Yorker.
The New Yorker magazine.
Yes. So she was a woman with will, with a very, very strong character. And she was absolutely into what now we could call feminism. That time, I mean, it's very early feminism, right? And she really pushed the boundaries to move women forward and to the core of society. So she was very interested in research about women, and that was one of her desires, that her money will go to fund the study of women in society.
So 60 years later, Ed Kemp goes to New York, and he goes and meets Jane Grant. Jane Grant has passed away by this point.
Yes.
So he goes and he meets Jane Grant's husband. So what happens then?
William Harris. Well, Ed Kemp hears about Harris, and actually Kemp talks to Bob Clark, then University of Oregon president, and tells him about Harris. So Bob Clark actually goes to New York and talks to Harris and tells him a little bit about, this small center for the sociological study of women that is established here at the university, but that they were looking to grow and expand. And Harris and Clark became close friends. They started talking to one another. And throughout the years, basically, he got to know about the work of the University of Oregon. He visited campus and then decided that he was going to donate his money to research on women at the University of Oregon.
And what is interesting to know is that actually he had offered that money earlier to Harvard.
Ah,
And Harvard wanted the money, but they didn't want to do the topic.
interesting.
So he basically decided to wait and then found the University of Oregon, this university in the West Coast that was smaller at that time with this very small center in the sociological department, decided to give the money that this was the place. So.
Did you want to add something?
No, I would, yeah, it's exactly what Gabriela said. It's just, this is, you know, also some of our, as Joan and Marilyn sort of described in the documentary, and they just seem so, you know, relaxed and kind of laugh about the fact that, and they give the money to this relatively, or really unknown university in the West Coast, and here we are, and we have all this money, and now, you know, then we became somebody, and then our voices, you know, began to be heard. So it's, yeah, it's an interesting.
So it is at that
change.
time that the name was changed to the Center for the Study of Women in Society, because that's the mission of the gift of
once,
the
once the endowment
yeah.
came in 1983. Yeah.
A little bit broader than
1983.
sociological, not just for sociologists anymore.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And are there any other people in this story that you haven't told us about that you'd like to tell us about? Any other people that played a crucial role in the history of the center?
Well, I would like to mention, God, I'm blanking in her name. I hope this is not in the air. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think a lot of, all of the people, or most of the people that are in the documentary really contributed in one way or another to what CSW is today, whether it is the former and present leadership of it, whether it is the individuals who worked alongside CSWS or were at the university before CSWS, such as the Women's Center or Women in Gender Studies. So all these, all these parallel relationships that sort of came together and collaborated at different times, and so it's like a messy history, but it's a strong one and ever present throughout.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention Sandy Morgan. Sandy Morgan was actually, if I'm not mistaken, the director for 15 years. So she was also very instrumental in shaping CSWS. She came here after the gift was given, and probably, if I'm not mistaken, she was like the first director hired to direct that center that was coming from outside. And she has done a wonderful job of shaping what was a solid base for what we have now, and that other directors have continued with that.
So tell us a little bit about the process of making the film. What are the roles that each of you played in the process? Did you both do everything, or did you divide the labor?
Well, Sonia and I have a very peculiar way of working. She always tells me, no, you are the director. I always insist that we both are co-producers and co-directors. She has done a lot of the heavy lifting for this documentary. Probably I have done a lot of the intellectual thinking, or advising things. But it is a true collaboration. I don't think we can say I've done this or you have done that. That's the way we work. This is the second project we are working together, and pretty much we collaborate with each other, and we know our strengths and our weaknesses, so we kind of complement each other.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of the project too, we were familiar already with the history, but part of it was also, deeper discovery about the history. So a lot of those questions would come up. Okay, how do we take care of this? This is an important conversation to have in the documentary, but we don't have 5 hours for a documentary. So it was a lot of conversation, a lot of work is kind of like grounded theory, right? Just kind of emergence, it happens, and we make it happen one way or another.
So can you tell me about a particular discovery or two that were especially striking or powerful for you?
Wow. I've been amazed at the whole sort of history of CSSW to CSWS. I think that oftentimes, as it is addressed in the documentary, we don't think where, like as I said earlier, you know, the term gender comes from. What were those fights to be able to talk about, you know, women in the classroom and sort of take that feminist focus? So the struggles, the fights, the actions that have really led to an entire sort of, you know, to contribute to feminist, you know, feminist theory, feminist thinking, to contribute to interdisciplinarity, and just all of that conversation is just, you don't think about it, it's just so common sense today. And I think for me, that part of it was very interesting, kind of to hear it from people who were the actual movers and shakers behind it.
What inspired you to undertake this project?
Well, I'm the associate director of the Center for the Study of Women in Society, so I was asked to produce this if I wanted. You know, it wasn't an imposition by no means, but I thought that, you know, it's such a rich history just on talking with all these different women, wonderful women who are, and from different generations. You know, you have Joan Acker, and then you have Carol Stabile. I mean, it's a whole generational difference there in ways of thinking or approaching things, but at the same time that are combined, that are, you know, one sustains the other. So learning about all this rich history was very appealing to me, to tell the story of this particular center. And I think it deserves, because 40 years, I mean, for a research center about women, I think, you know, it's a milestone, and we have to celebrate it, and we have to commemorate that. And also we wanted to create something, you know, a documentary that it's not just the history of this place, and, you know, next year it's going to go to the shelves. But actually we have the way it's edited and all of that, it's going to be useful for classes, for the classroom, for anybody who's teaching feminist courses or gender courses or just history about women in the United States and academia, feminism in academia. So.
Can you tell us something about changes that have happened at the center, ways in which the vision of the center or the actions of the center have changed over that period, that 40-year period?
Yeah, I would say that it's been evolving as the field has been evolving. And one of the discussions today in the 21st century, 2013, is actually, for instance, incorporating, well, we have been incorporating gender for a long time now, but also incorporating other intersectionalities between women, gender, race, class, all of that, and even as masculinity, because I mean the world of women is not isolated from men, right? So it's part of society. So I think the center is becoming more inclusive in that, but that's the way the field is moving as well. So I would say that in 40 years you see a change in that regard. Also, it is highly interdisciplinary. It began as sociology. Well, nowadays, basically anybody. I mean, I'm from a professional school, and I'm there, and I do work there. So it's very, very interdisciplinary, and I think that really enriches research on campus.
Tell us about the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies and how its founding is involved with CSWS.
Well, the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies was born or incubated inside CSWS out of a RIG, a research interest group, America's RIG. So it was from there that Lynn Stevens started working on developing this other center. And so basically CSWS was, you know, a very good platform for that, because through the research interest group of the Americas, we have people from different areas and willing to work in developing a center that will bridge Latino and Latin American studies.
And that's a great example of these changes, the transformations that you're talking about.
Absolutely, and actually these rigs were developed, I believe, when Sandy Morgan was director, and at the beginning people didn't thought that it was going to work. And now, I mean, they are serving as a model for class and for other centers, and it's really very rich, you know, for all faculty and graduate students involved in those groups.
Did you want to add something?
Well, I mean, just in kind of thinking about the importance of the rigs too, and what all the work that has emerged out of the rigs is also the work that, you know, like class, but also like the work that Carol Seville is doing on, is it ADA, on the online publication, and sort of the move to digital humanities as well. And a lot of, you know, I mean, as a graduate student too, what has been really important is having those rigs for, you know, the intellectual support, the community support, and to be able to, you know, try to get grants that can help us, you know, help tremendously in terms of advancing our own work. So I think for graduate students, the center has also been really important.
Yeah, I mean, say a little bit more about that. What that tells us about the vision of the center, the importance that the center places on supporting graduate student research and graduate student activities. How is that, you know, what does that tell us about the center?
That is completely indispensable. You know, even through some of the interviews with graduate students who have received Jane Grant, the awards, have talked about, and I completely sympathize with this, is being able to have a community that supports you, that helps you think about your own work, that pushes you to think further about your own work. A place where you can get financial support through grants, so it gives you the time to actually see your work through and be able to write and conduct the research, because as you probably know, as a graduate student, you're, you know, teaching, you're taking classes, you're doing a million things, as faculty do too, but having that time to be able to do the writing and and go to conferences and be involved in other activities that are, you know, like conferences is very important to the life of graduate students here, and that has been, that sort of environment and that sort of help is just phenomenal. But I think more than anything, the work with the rigs and finding that common voice with the center and other people who are like-minded is what's really important.
I think if I could add to that, I think that what that tells about CSWS is also that it's this place that it's not dedicated just to faculty, but it's also very invested in helping graduate students become our peers, you know, and grow, and grow in their careers, in their fields, and understand what it takes to be faculty, and that there should be community, and that you have a place on this campus where you can go and explore different things while you still can do it in a manner that it's supportive of what you are exploring.
So I'd like to ask each of you if you could tell me, if this isn't too unfair of a question, what's the most important thing you learned making this documentary? And I mean this in any sense, about feminism in America, about the American Academy, about academic labor and activism among women, about the University of Oregon. If there was one thing that you wanted to say, you know, wow, that was the thing I had no idea about, and it really it taught me something really important, what would that be?
Well, it's I think many things, but for me, I mean, I am an immigrant, so for me, it was very enriching to learn more about not only feminism, which I have studied obviously at the university, but to learn the history of American academia and how feminism and women and gender studies, queer studies, all of that, how that got into American academia and how women have to fight to get that space. Because some people that are not Americans or we haven't grew up here, we take it for granted that, oh yeah, the Americans always have had it all, right? Or it was, you know, free and there were no real fights. But actually, there has been a struggle, and it's good to acknowledge that struggle and learn about it. And I think the struggle continues. I don't think we have arrived to a place where we can feel complacent and say, yes, you know, we are 40 years here and this is, you know, nothing else to fight about. I think that continues. So for me to learn about feminism in American academia was very, very enriching.
How about for you, Sonia?
Well, I would certainly have to echo a lot of that too, that history has been really important. And that also just that struggle continues. Maybe it's taken a different form, shape, color, whatever you want to call it, but that there is still a lot more work that needs to be done. And it's great to see that women throughout all these years, throughout these decades, at least the ones that we interviewed, that they continue to have that spirit and that more, and that the center continues to grow because of the demand of women and men who are interested in, feminism, interdisciplinarity, gender theories, queer theories, you name it.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks.
We've been speaking with Gabriella Martinez, Associate Professor in the School of Journalism and Communication, and Sonia de la Cruz, a doctoral candidate in the School of Journalism and Communication. They recently completed a documentary film titled Agents of Change, A Legacy of Feminist Research, Teaching, and Activism at the University of Oregon. The film was produced to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Center for the Study of Women in Society. The film will be screened during the celebration on November 7th, 2013. Thank you for watching.